green industrial revolution. The man who needs no introduction whatsoever has been campaigning on climate issues since before I was born. It's Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you all for being here, middle of the day, discussing what is some of the most serious issues that we face at the present time. Can I say thank you, first of all, to Holly for what she said. Listen, you mentioned something about voting. Let's get this straight. A Labour government will lower the voting age to 16. Because I do believe young people should have a say in the future. And I want to say thank you to Helen for what he does as the local MP, but more importantly from my point of view is what he does as part of our team, part of Becky's team on environment and climate change issues, because he brings a knowledge and an expertise to it. Helen, thank you very much for all that you do. You bring these policies forward. As Helen and I were just discussing, these are the most exciting policies our party has ever had, and I'm very proud of the way they've been brought forward, this whole policy for a green industrial revolution. And the work that's been done here in Southampton, Green City Charter for Southampton, thank you, Simon, for that. Thank you for what you're doing on this, and thank you to the council for what they're doing on this, because this revolution isn't going to be one from above, it's going to be what communities do themselves. And I was very proud on May the 1st to introduce, on behalf of the Labour Party, a motion to Parliament saying that the UK Parliament would be the first in the world to declare a climate crisis, a climate emergency. Michael Gove replied to my speech. Two things emerged from this Michael Gove's rather lengthy contribution. The first was he doesn't like me one little bit. And that kept me awake for all of 30 seconds. Maybe not as long as that. And secondly, he didn't really have the ability to argue against what we were saying. He didn't want to be the minister that tried to prevent us putting this forward. Doesn't that say all about the bankruptcy of ideas they've got and the overflowing, the effervescence of ideas that are there in the Labour Party and the Labour movement about how the world could be such a very, very different place. This morning we were down there at Fawley looking at the wind turbine blades that have been made there. Incredible pieces of technology, which is the use of the very highest technology and highest technology skills in order to produce electricity from wind power with zero emissions altogether. And the only emissions, which are very, very small, are in the manufacture of the blades and the tower itself in the first place. Being constructed at the site of the Fawley power station, which was an oil-fired power station. Real 1960s state-of-the-art technology. We went up to the control room there. It's full of dials and switches and consoles and people. You can imagine sort of people running around in uniform, pulling switches down and so on. So on. And it was like something out of a science fiction movie. It was more like James Bond, actually. And it really is a quite stunningly beautiful place. And I hope it isn't destroyed, because it seems to me that we should remember the history of that kind of technology, which was advanced in its day, but we have to use the skills that made that technology to use for the future, to make a sustainable technology for the future that doesn't damage our world and damage our environment, but protects and preserves it. Technology is not the enemy of the natural world. Used properly, it's the saviour of the natural world. Let's look at it that way, and the skills that we what I also want to say is that the green industrial revolution is about creating jobs over the whole country, and that we're doing by holding local climate emergency conferences and local sessions. We're going to be holding one in the northeast in Middlesbrough. We've held some in a number of towns and cities already. And what's exciting is the people that come forward with all the ideas that they can put together on how you can get better public transport, how you can get better quality housing, how you can get cleaner energy, and how you can protect our natural world and our environment. Because if we don't, then what's there for the next generation? What's there for your generation? What's there for the one after that? The extinction rate, as Holly pointed out, is getting faster and faster in the natural world. And the way in which some natural forests, like the Amazon rainforest and the Angola forests and the Congo forests, have been destroyed by wanton destruction through fire in order to get the short-term and very short-term gain of growing soya crops on the land before it becomes exhausted, is that we are destroying species, the names of which we don't yet know. We haven't yet discovered them. It's wanton destruction on a massive scale. And who benefits from that? The companies that sell the soya or beef or whatever it is they happen to be selling as a result of that. And who loses? Well, the whole world loses as a result of that. And so it is a question of the reality of this emergency. Global temperatures are rising faster than they've ever risen before. The Arctic and Antarctic ice caps are melting faster than they've ever melted before. The loss of species is faster than it's ever been before, and the rising sea levels are causing serious problems of flooding, firstly in the poorest, most low-lying countries in the world, and eventually it affects everywhere. And pollution levels are rising to appalling and extraordinary levels in many major cities across the world. New Delhi is possibly one of the most polluted cities in the world, but cities in China and some major African cities are not far behind. And it's always the poorest people in the poorest communities that suffer the worst pollution and the lowest life expectancy as a result of it. And we're not immune from that in this country. Glasgow has the shortest life expectancy of any city across the UK. Levels of air pollution on major roads in London, in Birmingham and other places are absolutely appalling. So we have children losing up to 10% of their lung capacity before they reach the age of 5 because of the foul air they're breathing. It's not right, it's not necessary, and it can be changed. It can be changed not by ending all transport and all movement, but by converting very rapidly to electrically powered vehicles, to cleaner technology, to greener technology. And as Becky pointed out, it's jobs that will be created by doing this process, jobs that will be created in retrofitting houses, in developing public transport, and all that goes with it. But this industrial revolution, and it is an industrial revolution, will create the jobs and the sustainability in communities all over the country that will be totally left behind. I mentioned Middlesbrough and Teesside, where the Conservatives stood aside and allowed the steel industry to be destroyed and collapse. There's now a huge area of space with absolutely nothing happening on it. Ideal spot for developing green technologies and green industries. And so that the job opportunities are not lost to the people of Teesside. It doesn't just get laid waste by free market capitalism. Instead, it's saved by a Labour government investing public resources and public money in the people of those areas, that all the people of the whole country can benefit from it. Previous industrial revolutions always meant a massive shift of power and wealth from the poorest to the richest. Our industrial revolution will be a shift of power from the centre to the ground, will be a shift in the consumption of energy to make it cheaper for the mass, and more, and also the benefits will be there for all of our environment for all time for the future. That's why it's so exciting, and that's why to me it's going to be centre stage in our pre-election and in our election campaign. And I was proud to speak at the huge climate change rally that took place outside the Houses of Parliament the day before our Labour Party conference. And if there's a real comrade in the room, they'll bring up a glass of water for me in order to include the speech. And at this point, I'll remind you that under a Labour government, there will be publicly owned water that I'll be drinking, because it will bring... That publicly owned water will be for the benefit of all of us. And so, This is a way of our party ensuring that we go into that election campaign with something very, very important and very, very different to say. It is about how we as a community and a party face the future, but how the world faces the future. Look at the way in which, now there's a glass arriving, my goodness. I don't take alcohol, so is that applause for the water or the lack of alcohol? Thank you. Listen, this campaign is about getting that message across, but there are very powerful forces in the world that are looking the other way. The Paris Climate Change Accords were a huge step forward. I went to the Paris Climate Change Accord conference. It was very interesting, and it was fascinating and quite humbling to meet people coming from Bolivia and other countries who are bearing the brunt of climate change because they've got a drought in an area where there wasn't a drought before, and so on. Those stories came from all over the world, and they wanted the world's nations to do something about it. But it wasn't Bolivia, it wasn't Bangladesh, it wasn't Kenya, it wasn't Tanzania, it wasn't Sri Lanka that created global warming. It was actually Western Europe and North America for the most part. And so the responsibility is on all of us to reduce our emissions, to achieve the targets that you talked about. Responsibility is on all of us to do that. But in the US, you've got a president that walks away from the Paris Climate Change Accords, that is actively promoting the fossil fuel industry at the expense of renewables, and that sort of industrial and economic power is there all around the world. A Labour government will not be hand-holding with Donald Trump. We'll be walking alongside those heading the other way. And the Labour government will be wanting to strengthen the Paris Climate Change Accords, not reduce and damage them. This moment, we have a government in chaos in this country. We have a Prime Minister that seems to think it's an article of faith to be as rude as possible to anybody that you meet at any stage. And yesterday managed to be particularly rude to the German Chancellor and anybody else. Well, I often disagree with people. We all do. That's the nature of those of us that all hold strong beliefs. But you don't have to insult the other side, you don't have to be rude to them the whole time, you actually try to make some progress. And on Brexit, yes, it's an issue that at one level could be said, divide the party, divide the country, divide the community. I've spent I've been to probably nearly 90 marginal constituencies around the country in both Leave and Remain areas. I've had very long conversations with people who voted both Leave and Remain in the referendum. Private rented flat somewhere in Southampton and you're trying to get by, you've got exactly the same problems whether you voted Leave or Remain as somebody in the East End of London who's exactly the same situation and trying to survive on a 0 hours contract job and a universal credit snapping at their heels. Your problem is inequality, your problem is the lack of public services, your problem is a Tory government that removes wealth from the poorest and hands it out through tax relief to the very richest. It's the Tory government we've got to get rid of in order to improve our society. And so, our strategy is that we would, if in office, within 3 months negotiate an arrangement with the European Union that would maintain trade, maintain a customs relationship, protect the Northern Ireland open border, thus protecting the Good Friday Agreement, and maintain the environmental, consumer and working standards that we've got from the EU. Indeed, I want to extend them because I want to repeal the Trade Union Act on day one of a Labour government's office in order to improve working conditions. And then, at the end of that process, we would then say, well, it was a referendum that decided on this process, it's a referendum that should decide the future, one way or the other, between this credible Leave option or Remain and reform within the European Union. Bring people together. Don't divide them in the way the Tories are trying to do. And that is exactly what our strategy has been. This government
has not managed yet to win a vote in Parliament since Boris Johnson became Prime Minister, and he's so deftly arranged the parliamentary timetable that it will be, if Parliament is still in session, the end of October before he once again has to face Prime Minister's question time. It's the longest time any Prime Minister has avoided any questioning in Parliament. He's just done it once in September. And I don't recall any of my questions being answered on that occasion. The evidence is there in Hansard. And so we challenge them. We challenge them by passing legislation, which we did, which means they must require an extension by the 19th of October. And we will do everything we can to prevent a no-deal crash out. And I say to those people that think no deal means leaving things just as they are, it doesn't. Leave with no deal, we have a real immediate problems of food processing industry supplies, of manufacturing industry sales and supplies, of medical needs not being met. We have a massive range of problems straight away. Even Michael Gove recognises it's a problem because he's decided to employ 1,000 security staff to go on the M20, presumably to guard the queue of lorries that will be stretching from Dover to London on the M20 because of the imposition of customs checks. And Boris Johnson's idea of some kind of spying, flying border in Northern Ireland that isn't really a border but could be a border if you called it a border, and it's something like this, but these profits will soon work it out for you. It's okay, don't worry about it. It's such nonsense, and everybody can see through it straight away. Surely to goodness, we need somebody a bit more sensible doing these things and bringing a proper arrangement with the EU for the future, whether it's in or out of the EU. They are our neighbours. We've got to trade with them, work with them, and protect our environments and industries together. The alternative, and this is the real alternative that Johnson's on about, is a no-deal descent into the arms of Donald Trump and a sweetheart trade deal with the USA. I just say this, our NHS is not for sale to any American corporation or anybody else. An election campaign cannot be far away. It cannot be far away because the government has no legislative programme, and they're producing a Queen's speech next week, which is frankly an insult because they know they haven't got a majority to get it through, because 21 Tory MPs lost the whip, so he went from +1 to -41 in 2 weeks. It's some achievement. And they have no legislative programme, so this Queen's speech is just a piece of Tory party propaganda. Anyway, to help them out, I'll be making our version of a speech tomorrow in Northampton, setting out what we would see as the priorities for an incoming Labour government. But I can tell you this in advance. Austerity came in 2010 when the Tories became the largest party and the Liberal Democrats got into bed with them and put them into office. They put them into office, which passed a budget which slashed spending on local government, on health, on social care, on housing investment, on education investment, went on to treble university fees, to bring in tribunal fees, went on to create the hostile environment that Theresa May was so proud of in 2014. They have brought about a destruction in living standards, a rise in homelessness, a rise in rough sleeping, and a rise in absolute poverty, to the extent that the UN sends a rapporteur to Britain to look at the situation in Britain and says that the post-war consensus of the welfare state has been replaced by a nasty, cold and hostile environment towards the poorest people in this country. Slashing welfare benefits, slashing benefits for those with disabilities, and so on. The list is absolutely endless. Austerity was never an economic necessity. It was a political choice made by the Tories and the Liberal Democrats, and the results are there for all to see. Suicides of those people that have been denied benefits when they deserve them, or have been told they're fit for work when they're clearly not. And the levels of poverty, extreme poverty in Britain, are getting worse and worse. We're not the world's poorest country. We're the 5th richest country in the world. Surely to goodness, we've got enough in all of us to provide enough homes that nobody should sleep rough. And under a Labour government, within 5 years, we'll build 500,000 council homes that people will get decent, secure, clean, good quality, efficient housing. That surely, that alone is enough to fight for an election, to win a general election, to elect a Labour government, to ensure our community is properly managed. But an election is also about how we conduct ourselves in that election campaign. It's very tempting to get into bed with people and shout personal abuse at them and all the rest of it. No, we're not doing that. We're not going to the election campaign on some sort of bargain basement trading of abuse. I'm not getting into the gutter with anybody. What I'm going to be doing is setting out the Labour policies. The Labour policies on the environment, the Labour policies on the green industrial revolution, the National Investment Bank, the regional transformation funds, the investment in infrastructure, the investment in education, the investment in housing, in health, in social care, and the jobs that are going to be there for the future. But it's also about empowerment of people. We have an education system that is over-competitive and over-stressed. When primary school children are frightened of Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 testing, when teachers are walking away from the profession because they can't cope with the stress levels anymore, when more and more young people, particularly 11, 12 and young teenagers, 11 and 12-year-olds and young teenagers are being excluded from school for behavioural and other issues, and there's no teaching assistants to back up the teacher and support them or give that pastoral care support the young people need. What happens to those people excluded from school? What happens to them later on in life? Are we to continue down this road of a super competitive, league table dominated education system that actually damages the lifestyles and life chances of a proportion of our students? Of course I want students to do well. Of course I want them to get apprenticeships and go to university and make the very best of their lives. We all do, but we've got to remember we are there for every child in every school all the time they're going through full-time education. So we will end Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 testing. We will get rid of Ofsted and replace it with a supportive examination system for our education system. And we will end university fees. And yes, and I've told the CBI this, that we will be increasing corporation tax in order to pay for it, because I believe education should be a right, not a commodity. And so, our manifesto will be probably bigger than the one in 2017, because we've had a couple of years to add bits and pieces to it. And I want to say thank you to all those party members that have contributed policy ideas and taken part in lots of policy discussions all around the country, and also all the resolutions that come to conference and so on. All very valuable and very important. We're a movement, not just a party, we're a movement of more than 500,000 individual members and 3 million affiliated through our trade unions. We're also a movement that's in touch through our community organisers, and they're absolutely brilliant with communities all over the country. And so, it's going to be an empowered manifesto that will deliver for the people of this country, recognising the reality of people's lives. And it's not going to be a top-down process. It's not going to be government knows best, you'll take the rest of it. It's going to be something much more democratic than that. 3/4 of our manifesto will have to be delivered through local government. Therefore, we want to properly fund and empower local government. We also will bring into public ownership Royal Mail, the water industry and the railway industry in its entirety. But it will not be a nationalisation of the 1940s style. And Becky and I have discussed this many times. It will be a democratic process. There will be workers' involvement. There will be workers helping with the management of it. It will be the expertise of the postal worker that will help to merge Royal Mail with the post office and develop the post bank on every high street. It's going to be about community empowerment. Above all, it's turning our backs on the 40 years of neoliberalism that we've all been taught ever since Margaret Thatcher went into office in 1979. The idea that the only way forward is to reduce the public realm, increase the sense of individualism and competitiveness in society, and forget about the reality of those that need help and support and those that are unable to contribute because the facilities are not there to do it. It's about saying, yes, I want the next generation to be better off than this generation. I want the generation after that to be better off. I want them to live in a safer world than this one that's more environmentally sustainable than it is at the present time. I also want them to live in a world of global peace, not endless preparation for war. And so there are huge debates that will take place in the run-up to that election campaign. Towards the end of the 2017 campaign, people were talking about politics, talking about hope, talking about opportunities, talking about how their lives could be different. They were able to do it because we had the numbers on the streets to engage and encourage those conversations, and we had that huge presence on social media that managed to persuade so many people to register to vote who hadn't previously ever voted before. We did have and still have, I believe, the hostility of quite a lot of the mainstream media, but don't get me there, it's all right. I just wish they'd report things. But we also have our own ability to get our message across. And so I'm spending the time up to when the election's actually called, going all around the country, meeting party members, meeting community groups and so on. I've been, as I said, to almost 90 marginal constituencies already. And we had, for example, a huge rally in Newcastle on Saturday night with 2,800 people registered in 4 days for that rally. That's the sort of mood that is out there. And so a Labour government to win needs to win a lot of marginal constituencies. We need to win here in Southampton. You came ever so close last time. Let's make sure that doesn't happen again, that we do gain here, that we do win all along the south coast, and there's plenty of places to gain along the south coast, and I'll be in Hastings on Saturday helping them with their campaign. We've got all these places we need to gain all over the country. The road to a Labour government lies not necessarily in the words of the Daily Mail and their attacks on us. The road to a Labour government lies in our ability to have confidence in each other, to support each other, to put out a positive message, as Becky so rightly said, a positive message of one of hope. And when Becky talked about the People's Power Company, all I can say is this: we will set up a People's Power Company in order to give power to the people. Thank you very much.